thank you very much for the introduction, the warm introduction, and thanks again to our branch chef from Limpopo for the warm welcome, and also to our guest speakers and to everybody else that has taken time to join us today. Welcome. I'm going to try and be as quick as possible. So as many of you would know, my theme for this year was or is 2020, a time for reflection, renewal, and regeneration. And we actually getting close to the end of 2020, but I hope that you'll find that the message is still very relevant, and there's still a lot that needs to be done. So firstly, why did we choose this theme 2020? A time for reflection, renewal, and regeneration. As we were coming into 2020 over the last few years, there's been a number of changes that have been going on in the country. There's been a lot of uncertainty, I think a certain amount of trepidation. And as we were coming into 2020, and when one thinks about 2020, one always thinks about a vision for the future. So some kind of 2020 vision. And so I based my theme around this vision for the future and where we were coming into 2020 in the earlier part of this year. And I think that we are slowly seeing that this vision is crystallizing. And I also thought that it was appropriate at the beginning of the year, earlier towards the end of last year, also to reflect as to how we got here, how did we get to this point in time, what has been happening, and then there's some notes of positivity that we see coming through, and that's what I'm going to pick up in terms of what I think is happening in terms of renewal, and then looking just a little bit further ahead in terms of this whole regeneration project that we see unfolding slowly in the country. So as I said, coming into 2020, there was this uncertainty. I think we were going through this period of what I call a period of catharsis, of deep introspection of what's been happening. There's been a lot said about this lost decade and a lot of the opportunities that that were lost during this period. But I think also that there are a number of things that we see that are offering certain flickers of hope, and that there certainly is change that is happening in the country. And I want to pick up on a few of those issues that I think has started already this renewal process. And as I said, in terms of the regeneration, CESA is putting forward our ideas, our thoughts about how do we want to shape this vision for the future, and how can we actively contribute to what's going to happen in the next few years. Obviously, a very, very, very critical time in the history of our country, and we can see slowly that all of the social partners are coming together and forming this coherent and common vision. And as CESA, we want to be part of that vision, and also put forward our ideas in terms of this recovery. And then towards the end, in terms of the overall structure of the presentation, I'll just touch on a few of the ongoing initiatives that we are busy with at CESA and that we're going to continue with. And as we were busy with this, obviously COVID-19 struck, and we've been thrown into this pandemic and to crisis. Again, we know all about it. Hopefully, we're getting through to the end of it now. It's going to be with us for a few more years to come, but hopefully we've passed the peak of it, and we on the path to recovery, and hopefully this is going to subside over the next few months and the next few years. I think one of the key things that came up for us, especially in the engineering sector, is firstly the lack of access to basic services. And while we were talking about social distancing and appropriate measures of sanitation and hand washing and all of that, it just brought to the fore so many of our communities still don't have access to these basic services. And coupled with that, there's still the deep levels of inequality that exists in our society. And we're hoping now, through this recovery process that I'm going to talk about, that two of those very key challenges that we are going to address that as we embark on this road to recovery. We've spoken a lot, or we've heard a lot about the debt situation in the country. our Minister of Finance has described us as a debt hippo that's eating into our future. I will try and address some of that, but also one of the very, very key challenges that we're experiencing. And I think at this point in time, things are still uncertain. We're not quite sure about what this road ahead is going to be. So again, we'll try and put forward some of our views on how we can address those. So firstly, I'm going to, in terms of the reflection part of the theme this year, I just want to touch on a few of the issues. I think we're all very well familiar with what those issues are, a lot of the problems that have come up. So I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. So one of the key challenges for me around state capture is, apart from the amount of money that we lost, the key problem or the key challenge about state capture was that we've lost a lot of institutional capacity. A lot of our institutions has been hollowed out, and to the point where we cannot deliver on our mandate now. And something that I'm going to pick up later on as we get through to the solutions. Audit outcomes, again, an ongoing problem over a number of years now. Our audit outcomes have been deteriorating. And I think also coupled with that is what I call the unintended consequences of the audit process. You know, a lot of our officials, now that they can be held personally liable for some of the decisions that they make, that may not that may lead to negative audit outcomes, we're seeing that there's this reluctance for officials to make decisions. And obviously that slows down the whole decision-making process and also the implementation process. We've heard a little bit also about government communications across the various sectors of government, especially National Treasury, the way a lot of our implementing agents, the likes of Sandra, some of our other big implementing departments, infrastructure development, implementing departments, that there seems to be a lack of communication or poor communication about how to interpret certain pieces of legislation, regulations and things like that. And we're seeing the effect of that is that it just results in slower decision making and then ultimately in slower service delivery. Changing regulations, also a problematic area. We've come through the SIPTM process that was changed to FITPM. We now, the procurement, public procurement bill has been put out to comment. So I think we're also finding that as these regulations are changing, there's uncertainty for our implementing departments on how to interpret these regulations, especially when it comes to the supply chain space and how to actually implement. So again, results in slow decision making and slow implementation. Construction sector demas, we've heard again about most of our construction companies are in dire straits, and that we see that more and more filtering up the value chain, the infrastructure value chain in terms of our material suppliers, plant and equipment suppliers, and then most definitely in terms of us as built environment professionals. And that's across the value chain, whether it's engineers, architects, quantity surveys, all of us that are involved in the built environment space. We can see those effects coming through. We've spoken also about the construction mafia, and we know the havoc that's created on projects now that should have been implemented and should have been rolling out. So again, significant negative impacts. We've spoken about the ratings downgrade, the inability of the state to attract funding to borrow, and obviously the cost of that borrowing. We've heard about that from the earlier speech as well. And then just overall, there's been this lack of confidence in the country, in the sector itself. And all of these are painting a very bleak picture just again, reflecting on where we've come from and what the problems are actually that we're facing. I also just want to touch, I think that while there might have been a lot of these negative instances of where we've come from, I just want to point to a few areas where I think we have performed well. And the first one is, if you look at the CESA report card that's been drawn up now over 3 occasions, and we see from 2006 to 2011 there was actually this green arrow. This green arrow points to an improvement in the overall quality of of our infrastructure in the country. But since then, that has been on a downward trend, and it has actually deteriorated. But I'm more focusing on what that potential was from 2006 to 2011. We had that potential where we were implementing good infrastructure and focusing a bit on maintenance of our infrastructure. So really there was that potential at that time for us to produce this good infrastructure. And also, David earlier has touched on this graph, and I'm not going to go through it again, but just again to point to that in that run up to 2010, we had that potential in the industry to embark on this large infrastructure spend. And by and large, we did that very successfully. There were a few issues about collusion and things like that, but at the end of the day, that we were able to deliver that infrastructure. Well, whilst I'm not saying that the collusion was not a problem, I'm just pointing to the fact that we had the potential to implement that large infrastructure program. It's been flat since then, but I certainly think that we have that potential to do that now as well. And then I think if we look back over the last few years, broad-based Black economic empowerment has been somewhat of a success story. We haven't reached the end goal yet. Perhaps we don't know what that end goal is going to be, but there certainly has been a lot of progress that has been made in terms of BBBEE. So just from the stats that we as CESA are collecting, so this comes from our 2020, what we call our annual declarations, where all of our member firms have to declare a number of things, and part of that is our empowerment credentials. We can see now in 2020, 65% of our member firms are majority Black owned. 10% of Black women ownership greater than 30%, and then 66%, these first few blue parts of the pie graph here are level 1 and level 2, and then the others are 17% and 6% level 4 and level 3, and then 11% greater than level 4. So certainly we've seen good strides, and this is something that we're continuing to monitor, but we're seeing good progress in terms of BBBEE. So that was just a snapshot view of where we were coming into 2020, reflecting really on what has happened. And now I want to touch on a few issues that we think this renewal process has already started. And I think my views are maybe going to be slightly different from what David presented earlier. Our view is very much that it's a message of hope. This renewal process has started, and some of the regeneration has started, and maybe we're a bit more optimistic just from the heart because we're so involved in the industry. But I think some of the things that I'm going to touch on, I'm going to try and paint that picture of where we think that this regeneration and renewal process has already started. I'm certainly not saying that everything is looking rosy. There's still a lot of challenges that we need to address, but I'm hoping that we are on an upward trend. So firstly, in terms of the Zondo Commission, firstly, we're getting an indication of how the scale of the problem. We're calling it broad-based corruption, and the positive thing for us is that we understanding what the scale of the problem is, and as we begin to understand, then we can start to address the problem. And I think we can see in the last few months and last few weeks that there's certainly been a lot more emphasis on what's been happening. A lot of the stuff that's coming out from the ruling party, it points to this renewal process that we're trying to address these issues. Unfortunately, it's a very slow process, but I think the message is that we're supporting this process fully. It speaks to our core principles around ethics and integrity as CESA, and really I think it's excellent work that is being done by the Commission. I think the next thing was a very positive development was the Auditor General's office and the added powers that has been afforded to this office now in the Public Audit Amendment Bill that was published, I think it's 2 years ago now. But one of the key things that came out of that was that whereas previously the recommendations of the audit they were recommendations and they didn't necessarily needed to be implemented. And we saw that year on year, a lot of the government departments didn't actually implement any of the recommendations. But now those recommendations have to be implemented. And I think we're going to see over the short to medium term that as these recommendations and findings get implemented, or the solutions to those findings get implemented, we are going to see an improvement in those audit outcomes. So certainly a very positive development. I mentioned briefly the unintended consequences in terms of holding officials personally liable for some of the decisions that they make. We, at our conference that we fortunately had earlier this year, the Auditor General was one of our guest speakers, and he put this into context for us. And what he said that provided that the officials stick to the regulations and implement those regulations in terms of sticking to the rules and regulations, our officials shouldn't be concerned that they could be held personally liable, and that these provisions were put in place to curb the unauthorized expenditure, and where there's clear indications that the rules and regulations were flouted, and in terms of in instances of corruption and things like that. So I think there's going to be a slow process for our officials, and perhaps you can hear from the likes of Sandra how they're dealing with this issue. But we're hoping that they will take that on board, and that they will feel empowered to make the decisions, especially in the supply chain space. And then when it comes to things like variation orders and things like that. So there needs to be, as I say, there needs to be that balance between officials being empowered to make those decisions, but not overstepping their boundaries. One of the key issues, and David has touched on this earlier as well, in terms of some of the projects that have not been implemented. And for us, the issue is really about state capacity. I mentioned here that this has been addressed firstly in terms of the criminal justice sector, in terms of addressing a lot of the corruption and the malfeasance that has happened. But I think also in terms of our large infrastructure departments, public works and infrastructure, human settlements, water and sanitation, ESCOM, to name but a few, the political leadership has been put in place, and we're seeing slowly that the technical leadership is also being put in place. But I'm going to come back to the state capacity later, and a capable state. But there is this ongoing problem about this ability to attract suitably registered and professional staff to a lot of those key positions, the positions that actually make delivery happen. And then in terms of the successful programs, the IPP program was really a very successful program. Some of Sandral's concession programs also, they've been very successful over the years. And we're actually calling for some of those programs to be reinvigorated, because we've seen much success with those. So again, in terms of this renewal process, these interventions are putting us on that path to renewal. And then let me talk about the regeneration process that we believe has started already, and these green shoots that are emerging in our sector, in the country as well. So I'm going to touch on some of these things. We've heard again, and I think a lot of us know, and it's very positive for us, that this whole regeneration process and this whole economic recovery process is going to be based on an infrastructure build program. And obviously for us in the industry, this is a very, very welcome development. We've spoken briefly about debt, and the need to stabilize that debt. And I think the Minister of Finance, he might not be very popular, but he's putting into place a lot of these initiatives that is going to assist us in stabilizing debt. We know that infrastructure is a catalyst for growth. It's going to help us to address some of the inequalities that we spoke about earlier. And there's this huge opportunity around employment creation through the build program and through the maintenance programs that will come later on. And I think we must understand that infrastructure in itself is not the end goal. Infrastructure is an enabler to get our economy growing, and it has so many spin-off effects. But it needs to be the foundation on which we build our future. I think the other important thing is that we've heard about now the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium. The president himself has said that infrastructure is going to be the flywheel of the economy. We've heard about these investment-ready projects. Some of these projects have been gazetted already. And whilst we share to a limited extent some of the concerns that David has raised previously, but I think one of the key issues is around the capable state, and that there's just a lack of capacity in many parts of the state to be able to effectively implement these projects. And whilst again, I'm not saying that this applies across the state, there are certainly a number of these pockets of excellence in the state, and Sandral is one of them. That they've consistently rolled out their projects over the years. So there are those pockets, but we see that this is not common throughout all of our state departments, and this is one of the key challenges that needs to be addressed. I think also what we're seeing through this whole CITS process is that there's a renewed interest in the public-private partnership. And it's not only in the limited sense of PPPs, but it's in a broader sense of bringing the private sector in. The private sector has been very much involved in this whole, in crafting our economic recovery plan. And you would have seen, I think it was yesterday, that through the NEDLAC process, that there has now been that consensus has been reached on this whole economic recovery process. Excuse me, with all of the social partners, including business, labor, and the state, and the community-based. The community-based organizations as well. So we've got broad consensus on what this economic recovery plan is going to be, and I hope in the next few days that plan will be published, so we know what the details are on it. So this public-private partnership, I think that was one of the problems as to why a lot of those projects that we looked at previously were not implemented. There was a funding issue. I think the private sector has come on board now to say that we are here, we are ready to implement, but we need to see this overall plan on how the economic recovery is going to be structured. And we can see now more and more interest and appetite from the private sector, certainly in terms of the funding space, to start funding some of these projects. So slowly we can see that confidence and certainty coming back into the process. So Spoken a little bit, or I've touched on a little bit about the capable state, and you know, up to the president's office, he's acknowledged that there's just that the capacity just doesn't lie in the state at the moment. I've mentioned some of the renewal processes that have started in terms of rebuilding, recapacitating the state. But I think in terms of the programs that we are looking at implementing now over the next few years, that capacity certainly does not exist in the state. And this is where we think as CESA that there's going to be a lot more collaboration between the public and private capacity. We've been fortunate that we've been quite intimately involved in the whole SIDS process, and we've been fortunate as well that we've been invited to some of the discussions where the president himself was sitting there, and we've been able to put forward some of our views. And one of the key things that we're saying is that as CESA or in the private sector, we have capacity to implement these projects. We obviously have the know-how, we've got the capable people, professionally registered people, and that capacity is sitting in the private sector. And we were very pleased as well that the Minister of Public Works very recently, and a number of times now, that she said that this lack of capacity is an absolute myth. The problem is that there's not enough capacity in our state institutions, but there's certainly capacity that exists in the rest of the country, and a lot of that capacity is sitting in the private sector. So how do we bridge that gap now in the short term to be able to use that private sector capacity to assist our state departments to roll out these projects that are going to come, to roll out these programs that are going to come? We've spoken about a number of, and we've put forward a number of our ideas around this. The first one is the owner's engineer's concept. And again, it's not a new concept. We bring in that private sector capacity as an owner's engineer to assist any of the state departments to help them with the upfront work that needs to be done in terms of the infrastructure programs, whether it's feasibility studies or master plans or anything like that. But you bring in the private capacity as your owner's engineer to do that, and then you have a separate team that's going to actually implement those projects. And that's going to assist the state to unblock a lot of the projects that have been stuck in the planning and feasibility stage for a number of years. The other idea that we put forward is, again, not a new idea, but around secondments. How can we bring in, through secondments, whether it's retired professionals or professionals that are currently not employed? We've actually made our databases available to the Minister of Public Works, and you see she's actually used some of those databases in some of our talks and things recently. There are a number of professionals in the country, also our retired professionals that are not gainfully employed, and that they are more than willing to lend their services. So again, to unlock some of the short-term blockages that exist in the public space. And then the last thing we've said is we are also prepared to volunteer some of our services, and where again the capacity that sits in our CESA member companies, we can second some of our senior practitioners to again assist to unblock the blockages. Obviously, that needs to be done in quite a structured format. We need to know what the rules of engagement are going to be, so that some of our member firms are not precluded from doing some of the downstream work. But there are ways that we can achieve this goal. So our message really is that the capacity, the expertise sits in the private capacity, in the private sector. How can we use that now to enable a capable state in the short term? And then through this process, the state can start building up its own in-house capacity. There are a lot of young engineers that are sitting in the state. Through this process, how can we mentor them and build up that capacity then in the state, so that in the medium to long term that capacity returns to the state. So one of the key things that needs to be addressed if we are going to embark on this infrastructure build program. I've mentioned briefly the Infrastructure and Investment Office and the CIDS process, those catalytic projects that are really founded in the National Development Plan. We're looking now for the detail on how those projects are going to be implemented. I think fair enough, some of those projects have been on the cards for a long time. There could have been issues around the capacity to implement those projects. There could have been problems around funding for those projects. And I think now there's just now that we've seen this appetite from the private sector to fund those projects, now that we're seeing that we can possibly use the capacity that's sitting in the private sector, we are hoping that these projects are now actually going to hit the ground and we're actually going to implement these projects. I've mentioned the lack of capacity there. Another key intervention that has been mentioned is the district development model. I think when it was spoken about before, we were very, again, excited about it because it was going to address some of the problems or many of the problems that experienced at the local government level. I think we all understand the dire straits that our municipalities find themselves in. And we were hoping that this the district development model was going to put in place a plan as to how to assist our municipalities. Municipalities are the coalface of where delivery happens. And we need to fix that level of government. And again, as CESA, we can use some of those things that I've spoken about before to address some of these problems. I mentioned their political will because I think that these programs have been mooted before. They weren't strongly supported through politically, and I think that's why they didn't. We didn't realize the benefits that we thought would happen. But hopefully, we can get this program going. This will be driven by COGTA. I think our minister has been quite busy with this whole lockdown situation. So hopefully, as that frees up now, she's going to be spending a lot more time on this model. We're going to continue to have, discussions with COGTA as to how they foresee this model being implemented. In terms of Pan-African growth and the broader recovery program, we see our minister the president talking about this as well. As the chair of the African Union, there is going to be this Afrocentric approach. This continental free trade agreement is hopefully going to come into play more and more, and we're going to see now a broader African response in terms of economic recovery. And a lot of the African states also are speaking about an infrastructure-led economic recovery program. And as we know, a lot of our South African firms, both our BEPs and our contractors, have long been working in the rest of Africa, and we hope we can support them now to continue that work. Our export councils they're facing a lot of challenges again. There's some talk through DTI to get these export councils reinvigorated, and we need to drive and support this greater Afrocentric approach and an Africa-wide recovery program. Then finally, on this, in terms of this regeneration process, there's been a number of models that we've used in the past for infrastructure delivery. And I've spoken about some of them, the IPP and the concession, but we've also used the bots and the D-bots that have worked so successfully over a number of years, a number of programs, but we seem to have forgotten about them. And I think this, coupled now with this district development model, that we can start replicating some of those programs, and we can actually use those models. They have worked in the past, and we need to start implementing. And again, a lot of those models, they in the CIDB toolkits, they're nothing new. They've proven models, and we need to start exploiting those things to see how best we can deliver our infrastructure. I think we stuck on a design by employer type of model where the consultant does the design, and then we go through a tender process. But there's certainly a lot other models that we can use, and we need to start using those more. I am getting to the end. So I've spoken a bit about regeneration on a broader industry scale. I just want to talk a little bit about the issues that I think that's going to assist us now, just in terms of the industry itself. The CIDB Register of Professional Service Providers, again, that's something that's been in the pipeline for a number of years. But as CESA, we're supporting this register. We think that we need to get to a stage where only registered professional service providers must be allowed to contract with the states. A number of other African countries are doing this already. We need to be careful about how we structure this register, but I think it's going to be bring in a certain level of screening and accountability into the process, so we don't get tenderpreneurs working in our space, people that are not adequately or appropriately qualified to do this kind of work. But as I say, we need to be very careful about how we structure this so that we don't exclude new entrants, some of our smaller firms and things like that. But firms that have appropriately registered individuals with the likes of CESA and all of the other built environment or the statutory councils, we need to get this register going. The second one we're quite excited about now, and that we've been working on for a number of years, is our collaboration with CESA. The fee guidelines have been put out for comment. I think they closed the other day. Very, very positive development. Hopefully we can finalize that by the end of the year. I think the guideline itself, it needs a fair amount of work to get it to the stage where we can implement it. But the key thing about that is that it's going to help a lot of our municipalities to determine what an appropriate fee is going to be for the work that we do. And that, we start moving from this, away from this mad tendering scenario that we find ourselves in. And it's really a race to the bottom. And we're hoping when these guidelines get implemented, it'll bring back some sort of normality to the fees that are going to be charged. I think very important with that, and coupled with that, is the scope of services. If we as built environment professionals, if we deliver the services that accompany that fee guideline, the scope of services, and we ensure that our clients get value for money, I think our clients will realize the value that we bring to the table, and that they will be more encouraged to follow those guidelines in terms of what the appropriate fee is supposed to be. And then many of you would have seen the identification of work has also been gazetted, and that really is also a huge step forward, so that only appropriately qualified people can do certain scopes of services or levels of work. I just want to go through this last few things quite quickly because I'm getting to the end of my time. Coupled with these fee guidelines and the scope of services, we've always advocated the QCBS, or the quality cost-based selection process for the sourcing of our services. So we are very committed, we are fully committed to competitive sourcing of our services, but it cannot be on a lowest cost basis. And this quality and functionality criteria must be brought in. A lot of clients are using it. It needs to be brought in more and more, so it must become a standard. We think, or we're calling for that across the industry. Again, it can't be used to exclude. It must have enough flexibility to bring in new entrants and the smaller firms, but it must be based on this quality cost-based selection type of approach. In terms of the new normal, I think we've become so accustomed to this now. It is the normal now. And this is more to us as member firms, as consulting engineering practices. How do we interact with our clients? In terms of our deliverables, how do we empower our people now in this new type of environment, moving more to an outcomes-based type approach rather than an input type approach. So I don't want to talk a lot about that, but I think by and large we've adapted to this now. but you know, there's still work for us to do to become fully accustomed to this new way of working. And then finally, in terms of technology, the technology is available. The technology is there. It enables us now to do all of the work that we're doing. I think, you know, as private sector, we really are early adopters of technology. And I think through this journey now, how do we empower the state as well through our projects and through our clients as well? We need to start getting them to build in these technology outcomes into the projects that they're doing, so that it's not only a project on the ground, but there must be some sort of wider technology adoption and asset management plans and things like that that are built into the projects, so that we continue on this this technology journey. You know, I just want to mention something. We were on a FIDIC conference the last 2 days, and the lady from the UK, they're building a new what they call high-speed tour link between London and Birmingham in the north. But in their first phase of procurement, they've put out work to the value of £13 billion, and all of that was all of the procurement for that was done online, virtually. So certainly the technology is there. It's complicated projects that they are doing this with, using those platforms for procurement. So you know, the opportunity is there for us as well, and we need to start taking our clients along this journey as well. So we embrace technology more and more. So just finally, in terms of continuing CESA initiatives, I just want to add there, in terms of the regeneration, I think you'll agree with me that our view is that there are a lot of positives. There are still certainly a lot of challenges, but we can see those green shoots emerging, and we are maybe a lot more positive than some of our economists that are looking at just the hard facts. Maybe, as I said, because we've got more heart in our industry. Yeah, so in terms of the continuing initiatives, in terms of transformation, I've painted the picture of where we're at. It's going to be a continuing focus area for us. And there are a lot of things that we're trying to do to continue this transformation journey. Our management development program, that's for our young professionals, that has been converted now into a fully online offering. It's been running for a number of years, and it's been a hugely successful program, and we're continuing to develop our future leaders. In terms of the YP Young Professional Leadership Seminars, also it's been converted to an online platform, an online offering, and we're encouraging these leadership seminars are not only for CESA member firms. We're encouraging YPs across the spectrum to come and join and listen to what's happening and share their views as well from a client perspective or a contractor perspective. I spoke about the database, so that's being maintained by CESA, and it's useful now that we can share it with decision makers in government to say that there are certainly a lot of people in the industry that are unemployed, and let's start bringing them back where this lack of capacity might exist. Yeah, just in terms of engagement with stakeholders, that's one of our key functions here at CESA is to continue to engage with all of our stakeholders. I mentioned the whole SIDS program. Fortunately, as I said, we put forward a lot of our, and most of the things that I've mentioned, we put forward a lot of our thoughts and ideas, and hopefully now some of those things can be put into the recovery program. So, yeah, sorry, the last one there, the Engineering Excellence Awards program, we are continuing with that this year as well. In spite of the lockdown, a lot of our projects continue. This is most of these projects were completed towards the end of last year or so, but we are going to continue with our awards event this year. Chris will share some details on that a little bit later. So just in conclusion, CESA, we've embraced the change. We're contributing positively to the discussion. In terms of the reflection and the renewal, I've highlighted some of the key concerns. But as I said, this regeneration process is started, we are ready at the table, and we want to participate and contribute to this regeneration process. I think a very important thing is that this common vision is emerging, and as I said, through this NEDLAC process now that we have broad agreement on what the recovery process is going to be. We hope that this vision is going to be spelled out in a lot more detail in the coming weeks. The call from our side, and I think that this is becoming more and more evident now, is that South Africa needs to become one big construction site. And this infrastructure investment and build is the only way that we're going to get out of the problems that we find ourselves in. So as CESA, we will continue to be the apex organization for consulting engineering in the country. And thank you very much for listening and for giving me this opportunity to address you. Hopefully we can pick up a discussion in the Q&A session. Thanks again.